few months ago, I made this beer, a non-alcoholic stout inspired by All Out Stout by Athletic Brewing Company. And it turned out pretty well. But down in the comments, a challenge was forming. The Brew Show is all about making homebrewing accessible and providing you with recipes, tips, and tutorials. And the host, Trent, is probably one of the hardest working dudes in the game. Once the challenge was set, we hopped on a call to talk through the details. Here's what's gonna go down. We each picked a commercial, non-alcoholic beer to serve as inspiration for the other person to brew. It's not necessarily about cloning that beer, it's really just for inspiration.
Which I think speaks to like the heart of this challenge, right? Like push each other out of our comfort zones to make something that maybe we wouldn't necessarily make. So like
for Trent, I chose this super delicious Florida Vice from Untitled Art, and Trent challenged me with a 2-time GABF gold medal winning Helles Lager. If you tasted this Helles, I almost guarantee you'd have no idea it was non-alcoholic. It has a beautiful appearance, a huge bready aroma, and a crisp and refreshing hop bite. It's a solid beer, and this is gonna be one heck of a challenge. In the past, when I've made non-alcoholic beers, I've used what I call the nanny state method to keep the ABV below 0.5%. You use the same amount of water that you'd normally use, but a lot less grain, like a lot less. This non-alcoholic stout used just 2.5 pounds or a little over 1 kilogram of malt in a 5-gallon batch. But I'm afraid if I do that with a simple Helles Lager grain bill, I won't get enough malt flavor and body in the beer. So this time I'm using a technique called non-enzymatic mashing. From what I've read, the NEM method will knock my efficiency down to around 23%, so I can use more malt and get more malt flavor. With the planning stage complete, all I need to do is send this recipe over to the controller on my Brewtools B40. Now, let's make some beer. For the NEM method, I'm starting with some super cold reverse osmosis water that I chilled in the refrigerator overnight. And to help shape the body and perception of the hops, I'm adding some water additions like gypsum and calcium chloride. This step is always important, but especially in this situation because we don't have a full grain bill to rely on. Now, I'm mashing into that super cold water with 5 pounds of Weyermann Bark Pilsner, 1 pound of Bark Vienna, and 4 ounces of Victory malt. That's 2.2 kilograms of Bark Pilsner, 453 grams of Bark Vienna, and 113 grams of Victory malt. Another thing to think about here is maybe some melanoidin malt to simulate a decoction mash, or you could simply perform a decoction. With everything nice and saturated, I'll let the mash rest for a few minutes before turning on the recirculation. Another really common way to perform this method is to use a brew bag and a bucket and allow the mash to rest in the refrigerator overnight. The benefit in doing it this way is you can avoid the gummy starches that sink to the bottom of the mash. I figured since I have the ability to recirculate like this, I might as well give it a shot and see how it goes. After an hour of recirculating cold water over the mash or simply mashing in the refrigerator overnight, the next step is to separate the grain from the wort and raise the temperature to 152 Fahrenheit or about 67 Celsius. So, with the basket up and out of the kettle, I'm continuing to recirculate to help clarify the wort. After a few minutes, I'm switching to the sparge manifold and sparging until I've collected about 8 gallons of wort in the kettle. Once we're up to temp, I'll spin this thing for 45 minutes or until all the starches are fully converted, then raise the temperature to 170 Fahrenheit or 77 Celsius for mash out. Alright, the pre-boil gravity is 1.004 and I'm working my way up to a boil. Once we're up to a full boil, it's time for the first hop addition. Here's 20 grams of Hallertau Mittelfrüh for the 60-minute addition, and I'll add 15 grams more and a Whirlflock tablet with 15 minutes remaining. At the end of the boil, I chilled the beer down as low as I could, then transferred to the fermenter, which in this case is the Blichmann Fermentator G4. This is the second time I've used this thing, and I like a lot of things about it, but this lid isn't one of them. Nonetheless, I got it sealed up and I'm putting it to bed in the fermentation station with the glycol chiller
set to 50 Fahrenheit or 10 Celsius. Later that night, I dropped some sediment from the tank and pitched the yeast. For this batch, I'm going with the classic 3470, which should chew through this in no time.
Just as predicted, this beer didn't take any time at all to ferment, but I let it hang out in the tank for a week anyways before transferring to a keg to condition for 2 more. But after tasting the results, I feel like it needs more hops. I'll be honest, normally I'd just accept these results and improve it with the next batch, but that's why I love the idea of a challenge like this. Knowing that another brewer is going to taste this beer, I want to push it as far as I can, and that means adding some more hops. So here's 1 ounce each of Hallertau Mittelfrüh and Czech Saaz, and I'm putting it right into the serving keg with some gelatin solution to further clarify the beer. After 3 days of contact time, I canned it up with my Blichmann beer gun and October SL1. Now, let's do a little quality control. The first version has a nice clear appearance and a malty aroma that follows right into the taste, but it's definitely missing some hops. The dry hop version still has a pretty clear appearance and malty aroma, but it also has some bright and spicy hop notes. I think the flavor was impacted by the hops the most. Not only does it have those hoppy flavors, but it also helps finish nice and crisp, and while it's not quite as mind-blowing as the example Trent shared with me, I think it's a pretty good beer, and I'm stoked to see what he thinks about it. It's been 4 weeks since I brewed my Helles Lager, and Trent and I found some time to sit down and sample each other's beer. I was lucky enough to drink first, and right when I cracked his open, I knew I was in for a treat. It might not look super fruity, but the aroma on this beer is screaming tropical fruit.
So what I actually did was I stabilized. I used potassium sorbate and metabisulfite to stop the yeast. So when I add the juice, it didn't re-ferment.
Yep.
And that kept a lot of the sweetness and I think keeps a lot of that fruit flavor and aroma intact.
Probably some body too. I'm going to go in for a taste.
Yeah. Cheers.
Oh, buddy. Yum. You get some of that. It's like that sweetness from the juice fills the body out.
Trent's beer turned out absolutely great, and I thought it was cool that he took a pretty unique way to get there. Now, let's see what he thinks about my Helles.
I got to the point of tasting it and just like kind of comparing it with that other beer. I was like, man, I need a little bit more hop bite on there. And so went ahead and dry hopped it in the keg, and here's the result here.
Well, off the bat, it's like beautiful. I love the color on it. Super like light and straw color. And it's nice and bubbly, as I can tell. Nice head. It smells like a Helles. It smells just like I remember the example smelling. So that's a great start. I'm going in for a taste. Whoa. This is really good. Hold on, I gotta go in for a second sip.
A second sip is always a good sign, and after talking it through with Trent, it sounds like we both agree on the results. This beer is super light and crispy, and it's just one of those beers that pairs well with being outside in the sun. And the best part is, you can drink a pile of them and still feel completely fine. Huge thanks to Trent from the Brew Show for accepting this challenge and sending me some delicious beer. Check out the video linked below to see how he took on the challenge, and while you're over there, make sure you subscribe to the Brew Show so you don't miss what's coming next. My name's Dan, this is Hops and Gnarly, thanks for hanging out with me today, I'll see you again soon.